Hello everyone. How are you all doing? I'm having a good day so far. Just have a mediocre hair day, but I think that's not a big deal. But hopefully, as I said, hopefully you're all doing well. Just gotta shield my stream. So today's stream, as you can see in the description, obviously in the title you can see it's about the World Cup, just recently finished for those who didn't watch it. But I think what I want to deal with in this stream is I'm not gonna get into the which team played best and those kinds of discussions. I want to talk about everything surrounding the World Cup except for the football itself. It doesn't mean that I don't have any views about the football itself. Maybe we can even talk about how the final went, but I'm more so focused how the World Cup in general went because, for example, in the grand final between Argentina and France, there are a lot of high-profile people in the stadium itself, watching the game, and I kind of thought to myself, between a lot of the things that happened even before the World Cup itself and during the World Cup itself, there's a lot of things that happened that a lot of people might forget these days that I think is very significant in terms of geopolitics, in terms of how people think, and stuff related to that. I wrote a kind of a short thing on Telegram, my thoughts on it. So if you want to see my Telegram channel, it's in the link is in the description below. You can read my thoughts on it, and I'm gonna more so move on to that writing, like based. This stream is gonna be based on the writing. I don't plan to talk about it for too long. Just some thoughts that I have about the competition itself, what this tells us about modern society, what this tells us about international politics, because this is not just some sports competition, right? And it's not even like just like the Olympics. This is a competition where a lot of the a lot of what is trying to be pushed onto the international community and stuff like that is something to pay attention to. For example, the anti-Skittle stance, the anti-lavender mafia stance that Qatar has, especially before the tournament, and during the first games of the tournament, there's a lot of criticism from a lot of liberal people, including from the English national team also, about oh, you don't accept these people, you don't accept this kind of behavior, you're so bad for not accepting that, right? There's a lot of pressure on that front, and I guess I can kind of start with that, and during some parts of the stream, I guess I can look at what some of you have to say, um, and just kind of engage in that manner. The first thing I'm gonna start, I'm gonna move on with. I'm gonna talk about basically the intention and kind of the politics surrounding the World Cup and how some teams reacted to it. I want to kind of dedicate a specific section of this stream to Morocco because I think there's something interesting about Morocco that I want to talk about. Zelensky stuff. I guess I can start with that too. I mean, the Zelensky stuff is hilarious. So for those who don't know, Zelensky asked to give a speech before the World Cup final. I mean, how idiotic is that? I mean, that's totally ridiculous. He asked the FIFA president, he asked, FIFA, hey, let me do an opening speech before the game. I mean, who gives a crap anymore? No one gives a crap. He will have been booed in the stadium. I mean, it's a good thing that it's good for him that he wasn't allowed. He'd be booed in the stadium. A lot of people are suffering because of the idiocy and because he's a total Western puppet. He's a total shill. He doesn't, I mean, NATO's hand and the Western powers' hand is so far up his behind. Right? You can whenever he talks, you can see the hand controlling him. I mean, that's how obvious it is nowadays. And he wants to give a speech. Well, oh, we're bad and I mean, first of all, FIFA doesn't allow Russia to enter the competition. They've already taken their stance. Basically, they've already taken their stance. You're allowed to compete. Russia isn't. So why do you want more, right? It's choosing beggars situation. Most people in the world, just because of this guy's shenanigans, are suffering due to the economics, due to the gas prices. You right? due to the international situation. No one wants to live in a world where the third, a huge conflict, right, out of nowhere might start because of this idiot and how he has poorly mismanaged the situation. And he has the goal to act as if he has not mismanaged anything, right? Which he has. He has absolutely mismanaged the whole situation. And his incompetency is one of the reasons why there's a war today. Okay, especially considering his main promise, right? Zelensky's promise first was that he was supposed to be this moderate candidate that wouldn't try to antagonize. He was going to be neutral. That was all a bunch of lies, right? Those were all bunch of that was all a lie. He has made millions of dollars even before he was president. Now he has even made more money. He is in close contact with all of the, elite Hollywood people, elite politics people, and he's getting all of the free stuff. He's getting so much free stuff from other countries, and he's still utterly failing. And obviously, for YouTube guidelines' sake, I condemn the war, blah, blah, blah. I don't think it should happen. It's a bad thing. It happens, etc., etc. This doesn't mean that I'm a pro-Putin shit. I think there's a lot of things to criticize about it, especially his, whatever justification he had those justifications 8 years ago. He spent 8 years and wasted, his own people's lives, right? The way he's approaching the situation is very inefficient. There's a lot of negative things to say about him as well, but that's kind of what I wanted to kind of start with. And then I want to kind of finish it with the final itself. I think the final is an excellent example of two very different views on the world, on nationalities and on civilizations. So two very different views. On the one hand, you have France and its diversity, and then you have Argentina, which is blanco. Okay, and it's not just the outward appearance or anything like that. The play styles, even the play styles, very excellently show the kind of way of thinking of two very different nations, two very different civilizations at this point. I mean, I wouldn't say Argentina is a civilization, but civilizational thinking, let's say. Right, on one hand, you have modern Western civilization. On the other hand, you have something, something like that, but at the same time, some ideas of traditional, understanding of what a civilization is. So I want to kind of go over that kind of stuff and some miscellaneous stuff as well. Another thing that I want to get into is the fact that how soulless this competition is. And what I mean by that is, if you look at the just like the World Cup was done in Qatar. Now, I believe the reason why the World Cup was done in Qatar, one of the reasons was that if a World Cup is going to be an organizational failure, right? I'm not saying that was the intention, but if it was to be an organizational failure, I think some people wanted that. It would be best if that was in Qatar, and I will explain why I think that way. But the second reason I think is that it really reflects modern civilization. Qatar, is a place, is not even a city, not even a country. It's a place, right? It's just a place where everything that is good about it, right? Everything that is civilizational just came from 10 years ago. It is soulless. It is just built based off of oil money and stuff like that. The stadium doesn't even have a history. The stadium was built, just very recently. It doesn't have a history. It doesn't have its own, soul. It doesn't have anything like that. The people there, Qatar is not a place where people really care about football. Let's be honest. They don't really care about football. And the attitude of the, people from places like Qatar, right, where they have a lot of money, they buy football clubs. And, what usually happens is that these clubs, become more and more soulless. They just become, money machines. Paris Saint-Germain is a great example. More than 10 years ago, PSG was not a good team. It was a mid-table team. And then, right, Middle Eastern rich people said, I'm going to buy this club, inject a lot of money, buy like all the top players. And now it's just like, again, it's a soulless organization. It doesn't have a good history. You look at the competition in France, it's just PSG, always winning. Lille won one time recently, but aside from that, the competition is stale, right? There's not true competition because now one team out of many had basically entered in a cheat code, and they're doing much better. I mean, the point is that whether you like sports or not, whether you like watching sports ball or not, and I respect those who like it, I respect those who don't like it. I think it's fine either way. Whatever you do that is useful for you, that's what I think is best for anyone, right? So sports ball can be good. It can be, it may motivate for you to do sports yourself and be healthy. It may, be something to talk about, right? Small talk with some of your friends to engage into deeper conversations, right? And it is also quite lindy. I mean, you had the Colosseum in Rome, right? Even when it was Christian, right? Even when the Roman Empire was Christian, you still had chariot races and stuff like that. So the idea of sports ball is actually very lindy. It's a very ancient idea. It's not some new thing, right? Spectator sports and all of that. I think football is much better than watching gladiators, definitely. But it's a very ancient idea, but this idea is now being diluted into something modern, something soulless, and something purely mercenary. The French national team is a great example of this. I don't think I need to point out how exactly it is a great example of this, but all I just gotta say is look at the nation that is representing and look at the players in it, and I think that's a very good question. Even the like like Hugo Lloris, for example, is he French? I mean, not really. um, for example, like Griezmann, he's Portuguese and German. So even those players, right? Even they aren't even French, right? They might have some French lineage, some, but even with them, there's like an argument where like, so you can see that the meaning of France, the meaning of being French, the meaning of being German, the meaning of being Italian, the meaning of being Turkish, Greek, Russian, Norwegian, Swedish, it's all going away, right? It's all being diluted. It's all being destroyed. And I think Qatar is a good place for that destruction. Not saying good in a moral sense, but it's a suitable place for that destruction. So that's one of the reasons I think. I think the second reason is that it's a place where a failure will be very good. Same thing with Russia, right? It would be really good for these people, right, for Western elites, if the World Cup in Russia was a failure, right? And why is that the case? Well, in Qatar, there was a lot of, aggression against Qatar from particularly liberals and Redditors and all of these people saying, oh, you mistreat these specific people and we don't like it. We don't like your ways. I mean, they're basically saying we don't like your civilization, we don't like your ways. That shall change, and we're going to do anything that we can change that. So I think this World Cup is a declaration of war in some sense of the liberal elites and their fight against, I suppose you can say the Islamic civilization. For instance, during the refugee crisis, where there was a lot of, and even before that, there was a lot of people from the Middle East, people from Africa, people from Muslim nations coming to Europe. I think one of the reasons why that was allowed to the extent was also to westernize a lot of Muslim people. Because we've seen for 2 decades, well, not 2 decades, for 2 centuries, the Western or the modernization of Christianity, right? Really for 2 centuries, I think. But even, since last century, I mean, you can say that Christianity has been, for a very long time, they've tried to modernize Christianity, and we're seeing the results today, right? Both in America and in Europe. Even somewhat traditional churches like Lutheranism, and I say somewhat, right? Still 500 years of history. I mean, they've been completely and utterly modernized. Female bishops, female priests, and stuff like that. So that we've seen the results of it. We're seeing the results of it very clearly. We're seeing it with the Roman Catholic Church now, and I think very soon. I mean, the war has already been declared against Orthodox Christianity for a long time, right? It's been going on for at least since even before the last century, right? There's a lot of aggression towards Orthodox Christian civilization, which was in Russia, right? which Russia was a bearer of. Now, this is the first time I have personally seen, not of the Muslims in their own country, but of Muslims outside of them being heavily criticized and attacked, and kind of in an international sense, and kind of like a declaration of war, where the liberal elites are not just fine with liberalizing the Muslims in their own country, they want to liberalize the Muslims outside of their own country now. So it's going to be very interesting to see how that happens. I personally think, in the next generation, we are going to see a lot more Muslims preaching, liberal interests. I think we already kind of see that, because a lot of, Muslims who immigrate to Europe, a lot of them do promote liberalism. But they couch it as if, well, it works for us, right? It works for us. They give us free money, it's beneficial for us, right? In a sense, you can kind of understand, right? But now it's very different. And I think, again, over the next generation, you're going to see a lot of new recruits. And I'm going to be very interested to see how it progresses. I was hanging out with my cousin, who's a Muslim. He's a practicing Muslim. And he showed me some German Muslims trying to give the rainbow flag to the Kaaba, right, to the cube, right? And they were doing like this inflatable Kaaba, which was like in rainbow colors, the 6-colored one, not the 7. And he was telling me, and he was just like, why do people do this, right? He's like, why do people do this? And I'm like, I'm just said, they've been doing this against Christians for 2 centuries, my friend. They just set their eyes on you. You're the new target. You're the new target now. So we'll see how you figure that out. So I think that's another reason why it will be a good organization. If Qatar, right, if the World Cup failed in Qatar, I mean, that would be an incredibly good PR for the liberals. Amazing PR, right? But, they can't even do a good organization. A lot of people will be more justified. Now, I mean, the organization was actually quite decent, right? It was actually quite decent. It wasn't as bad as people were saying, right? People were saying things like, they're going to pay people to act as if they support a nation, right? To like fill up the empty seats and stuff like that. Well, we've seen that actually hasn't really happened that much. We were seeing that kind of stuff before the World Cup, but we haven't seen a lot of it. So it wasn't an organizational failure. That didn't succeed. But I think people wanted it to be like that. So that's the first thing I want to kind of get into. And particularly some of the national teams, like England also, were very clear about their intentions. Right? They were very, very clear about their intentions. And I just saw the chat. And before I move on, with England, I just want to thank Karamasa for the 5 Brazilian reals. He says, didn't Real Madrid remove the Christian cross from its shield after the United Arab Emirates deal? No, they didn't remove it. What they did do is that when they sold their jerseys in the Middle East, they removed the cross from those versions. But Real Madrid as a club still has the cross. It's just that in the Middle East they don't, which is still not a good thing. Obviously, it's not a pleasant thing to see. And just before I continue, make sure to like the stream, everyone, so we get the good algorithm boost, so more people can see this. And make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Again, thank you, Karamasa, for the 5 Brazilian reals. I really appreciate the support. I also appreciate the support of everyone watching this stream right now. Hopefully, you're enjoying this. Now let's get to England, right? England didn't learn their lesson from the last international tournament, which was the European, right? The European Cup in 2020. What was the lesson? Well, in the finals, when they were playing against Italy, which there's a lot of parallels between Italy versus England and France versus Argentina. There's a lot of parallels. One of the rumors that's going around, and I don't know if it's true or not, but I can see that this is indeed something that does happen, is that one of the reasons why certain players were subbed in by the English manager is for the PR, right? There's already headlines ready. You can already see this in the World Cup itself, right? British headlines saying stuff like "Black Excellence." I mean, that's a strange headline. That's a very, very strange headline. I mean, if you change that with another race, I mean, I wonder what reaction that will have gotten. Imagine if it said, I'm not gonna. I can't even say it. YouTube won't allow me to do that. But you get the point. So a lot of people in the media were already very much ready to use football as an opportunity to shield their stuff. I mean, if you watch Premier League competitions, I mean, in the Premier League, it's absolutely insane. The corner flags, right? It's a rainbow flag. They have a bunch of different flags of different colors. Clubs have flags of different colors. Clubs have to constantly tout the line on the magic injection, right? From 2 years ago. They're talking about they will talk about how every single player has to do that and all this kind of stuff. I don't even believe they were actually doing that, but you have all of the different this again, Skittles player, Skittles people must be respected, blah blah blah. Even though the British media for like 10 years, there's an article that showcased that British media for like 10-15 years has been trying to find that magical Skittles player to promote him, but they actually cannot find any. They can't find even a single player that likes knobs instead of locks. if you catch my drift. So, well, I guess the correct term is keys. They prefer the keys instead of the locks. So they couldn't find a player like that. But England didn't learn their lesson, right? They subbed in certain players for that headline, right? For that headline that they were intended, and turns out those players actually missed the penalties. And they try to do the same thing this time with the Skittles stuff, right? They were talking about how they were going to wear the armband. There was someone that ran into the stadium who had the Skittles stuff in the front, and in the back he had like pro-Ukrainian stuff, and he was literally the epitome of like the current thing meme. It was literally the current thing, man. Maybe I can even find an image of him. He was literally I support the current thing guy, like running into the field with the Ukrainian flag and the 6-colored rainbow and all of this kind of stuff, and it was insane. Qatar field. Let me find an image of him. Maybe you haven't, just in case you haven't seen it. Yeah, I mean, this is just hilarious. Let me see. All right. Let me get the window capture thing. All right. So this is the image I was talking about. I mean, this is just. I'm surprised that people haven't memed this already. I'm genuinely surprised people haven't memed this already. All over the place. This is the Sojak current thing. Like, I support the current thing. Whatever it is, and it's just hilarious. And for all the stuff that people are talking about Qatar being mean and all of this kind of stuff, this man was freed after what he did, right? So nothing happened to him, nothing bad happened to him. Now they're talking about a conspiracy theory, right? The liberal conspiracy theory, right? When a liberal does a conspiracy theory, it's always the mean white people doing mean stuff. They had this conspiracy theory where this American sports journalist, they say, he had heart problems. Oh, I wonder why he had heart problems. Was there something that happened 2 years ago that might be the cause of it? I don't know. But they're saying, it's the Qatari government. I think that's obviously BS. So nonsensical. That's the last thing Qatar will want to have, is that kind of attention. That's the last thing they will want to have. Because then it will actually be a justification. They did their best not to give any justification to the liberals. So to get back to England, again, they tried to do all of these kinds of things. They couldn't even do it. They weren't even allowed to do it. FIFA, which is surprising, but FIFA just said, no, you're not going to do it. I'm not going to allow you. But then Infantino says, today I feel Qatari. Today I feel like a construction worker because of the, working condition stuff. Today I feel, Skittles, right? Like, he makes these pandering, stupid speeches, but then he, it's kind of impressive. He makes decent decisions, like not letting Zelensky speak and all of that. But England didn't learn their lesson, and interestingly, they lost to the one team that is worse than them in these regards, and it is France. France, a team full of mercenaries, Um, even there, as I said, even players like Hugo Lloris, who's half Spanish, Olivier Giroud, who's Italian, Griezmann, who's half German, half Portuguese. I mean, even these players aren't French. And I point out in the Telegram post that teams like France completely destroyed the whole point of a competition between nations. The whole point of a competition between nations is that you have nations, people of that nation, people representing that nation, competing for that nation. There's nothing of the sort in France. Nothing in the sort in the French national team. Nothing. Absolutely zero. So I want to get to Morocco next. I want to kind of dedicate some time to Morocco in this case, because Morocco was the dark horse of this tournament. And people usually like dark horses, right? People usually like the underdog stories, like the team that comes out of nowhere, starts beating all of these big teams, David versus Goliath. Everyone loves that kind of stuff. But especially since the quarterfinals, right? Especially like since they made the quarterfinals, the Moroccan national team has been incredibly obnoxious. And what I mean by that is that whenever they get interviewed, whenever they have the chance, they always try to do this virtue signaling thing where they're like trying to do Islamic prayers. They're trying to, they're trying to prostrate. They're trying to say, oh, everything's glory to Allah, and it's like, okay, whatever, that's normal. That's there's some soul, there's some spirit in it. But then they say what really made me kind of annoyed, and I think what made a lot of people annoyed is hearing them say stuff like, our performance in the World Cup is proof of, Islam being true. Be Muslim so you can be like us. Like, this kind of sentiment, especially from a lot of Muslims that themselves, like, Morocco's doing so good. This is proof of Islam being true. It's like, I mean, first of all, if you think that your fate is affected in any form by a worldly sports ball competition, like your iman is increased, right, because of a sports ball competition, well, that's a very insecure faith. That's a very insecure faith dependent on worldly things. I don't think it should be dependent on these things like that. I think it's a very insecure attitude. And it's also very obnoxious where, one Muslim team does very good in a sports ball competition. And suddenly that's proof for Islam. I mean, you look at the results. They got beaten by a nation, Croatia, 4 million people. There's only 4 million Croatians in Croatia. It's a Christian nation. It's a Catholic nation. It doesn't have diversity, right, or anything like that. They lost to Croatia, and the World Cup was won by Argentina, right? Blanco Argentina. That, by the way, pretty much all of their players are Christian, right? It's a Christian team. Many of the, they have tattoos, but many of the players, their tattoos are tattoos of, Christ, tattoos of the Virgin Mary. They cross themselves regularly. They clearly believe in God. They have, faith in God and all of that. I mean, I guess that's evidence of Christianity being true then, because Argentina won. I mean, that's ridiculous. That's absolutely and totally ridiculous. But now it's like, oh, no, that's not proof. That's God just punished us because we weren't good Muslims. We need to be better. I mean, that's just cope at the end of the day. If you win, that's proof that you're great. If you lose, that's proof that you need to do better. And the issue is thinking in this way isn't. I'm not saying thinking that way internally is bad, but when you speak about it publicly, it becomes very annoying and it becomes incredibly delusional. And after particularly the quarterfinals, I started to root against them personally because I just thought they're just so obnoxious about it. Like they did, okay, Turkey in the 2002 World Cup got third place. I mean, we don't get, we're not obnoxious about it, right? It's like, oh, we did, you did a little worse than us, and you're making such a big deal out of it. Okay, congratulations. It's just a sports ball competition. Like, calm down. Okay, calm down. It's just the World Cup. No one's gonna remember it in 2 weeks. Everyone's gonna forget about it, right? So that's kind of one thing that kind of like annoyed me about this. I guess it's not annoyed me fully. It's just something that it was very strange to me, in my personal opinion. Davis' point is that even the players you think are French aren't actually purely French. Yeah, that's kind of the point. I mean, like um, having players like that is, it's not bad, right? Um, like for example, Argentina had Alexis McAllister. I mean that he probably has some Anglo descent, but you know, Argentina as a whole doesn't have like 11 Alexis McAllisters. Is kind of the point, right? If you had 11 Alexis McAllisters that grew in like London and were Argentinian due to some kind of technicality, I mean, I will say the same thing, right? Um, so that's another thing that I will also point out. Uh, anyways, let's move on. The final thing I want to talk about. Well, I before I go to that, actually, I want to kind of get into the miscellaneous stuff. Apparently Elon Musk was there with Jared Kushner. I don't think most people care about that. Another thing that kind of annoys me, I'm going to talk very briefly about it because this is something that happens regularly. But now that we see it in a Muslim country, we can see that this problem is very much universal. And um, now, obviously, people are going to say, well, this person wasn't a Muslim, etc. And it's like, okay, but the fact that you still allowed it to happen shows that you're pretty close to it. I mean, I live in Turkey. I've seen this myself. I mean, some of the stuff I see today won't even be, you couldn't even imagine it 20 years ago. You couldn't even imagine it 15 years ago. Even 10 years ago, you couldn't even imagine. And now it's, some of the degenerate stuff, I guess, that's happening is like Kalkedon, Kadıköy. Like 10 years ago, it was already known as a liberal place, etc. And people were aware of it, but now it's like straight up communist, straight up far extreme leftist. Um, it's known as the place where people go to, like, it's a place where people go to hang out. It's not like it's some terrible place, right? It's a good, like, you can go there, right? It's a good place to go, but it's also one of the places where premarital sexual relations regularly occurs, for example. It's very regular. It's very common. So that's kind of what I try to get at. Not that it's super common in, like, it's not super common, but it's like that kind of stuff is encroaching, basically, even in Turkey, right, a Muslim country. So Instagram woman, right? Instagram influencers, right? That's what people call influencers. Influencing what exactly? A woman wearing some skimpy clothes. What is she influencing? What is that? What is that? Is it good influence? Is it influence that we need, we want to have? Obviously not. Um, these women that go to, I don't, women can go to stadiums and watch football games, right? But like when you have these models, Instagram influencers going to World Cup. Oh yeah, yeah, you sure do care about the World Cup, huh? You really do care about the World Cup, or are you there to boost up your numbers? And there's a really small number, but it's insignificant. But what makes them significant is that every single time you see on social media, you see on the television, you watch the game, and it's like panning out to like, oh look, an Instagram influencer, really hot woman. Oh, and it's like, and she's looking at, she notices that the camera's looking at her. It's like, oh, like, you don't care about the competition, you don't care about the game. You're just there to like advertise yourself, and maybe you're also there to do a certain thing that a lot of Instagram influencers do in the Middle East, being used as a toilet, literally. It's not even a rumor anymore. It's literally fact, right? People, especially in Dubai, they do that all the time. I mean, it's it's another reason why it's soulless, right? It's soullessness. It's a factor of soullessness. And why is it soullessness? It's not soulless because a woman is watching the World Cup game. It's soulless because it glamorizes people being there for reasons that has nothing to do with enjoying the match and more to do with what they can gain from just existing there. And it really showcases in our society, in Western societies, in Eastern societies, in Southern, Northern societies, any part of the world, this is a very strong trend that has become very much normalized. Um, and when you normalize, groups of people being there to just exist, and you reward them just to be in a place where they don't do anything other than just existing and just standing there, it very much showcases that we don't value what people do anymore. We don't value virtue. We don't value accomplishments. We don't value effort. We don't value hard work. We don't even value intelligence. We just value being cheap and self-serving. And a society that stands on stuff like that is not going to stand. It's not going to stand for a very long time. And we're already seeing the signs of that. So that's something that I saw. It was a pet peeve of mine. It's not some, incel thing, right? People are going to say, oh, you're an incel, you're blah, blah, blah. It's not an incel thing. It's not like anti-woman thing. It's like, I think women themselves should be pretty annoyed about that. Women the 5 women that exist on earth that is actually really genuinely interested about football might be very much annoyed by that. And I respect their opinion because it's something they enjoy watching to. They enjoy watching it. They're entertained by it. And I respect that. But I don't respect people who are, whether it's a woman or a man. It's just that you don't see that as you don't see a man doing that. I guess one of the reasons is because you won't be awarded for doing that, I suppose. But the final thing I want to get to, and I think this is the real meat and bones of the stream. All right. The meat and bones is the grand final of the match. Big grand final. France versus Argentina. What is going on? Never mind. France versus Argentina. Two teams representing two very different worldviews, two very different even civilizations, two very different nations. You have, on the one hand, Argentina. Traditional, kind of like a traditional, somewhat traditional. When you look at the players, you can see, yes, they are Argentinian. They speak the same language. They're part of the same culture. They know each other quite well. There's homogeneity. There's trust between each of the players. The players, love each other. They have, many of them are friends with each other. They have a real desire. They have a real, they have soul. Everything about them screams soul, 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 right? Same thing with Croatia, to be honest. Croatia, everything about them screams soul. And I'm not a big fan of Croatia. I'm not a big fan of Argentina either. But I do appreciate Argentina being Argentinian. And I do appreciate Croatia being Croatian. Except for the some of the other stuff in history. But I'm not going to get into that topic. I'm sorry, Serbian friends. I'm not going to get into that discussion. But I'm basically saying, I enjoy seeing nations being nations because there's a magic behind being a nation, right? There's a magic in living in a country where people around you are basically in some form you. They're an extension of your family. You can trust them. They're of your blood. It gives you comfort to know that if something volatile happened in the country one day, that the stranger walking right next to you is willing to fight for you, that he is willing to lay his life aside from you, that he is willing to give his life, his life savings, his money away for you. It's comforting to know that, right? And in Argentina, generally speaking, right, there's that kind of trust. It's not like a super high trust society, but at the very least, in its football team, you can see that being represented. Even if in reality that might not be a good representation of Argentina, the team represents that, and that's a good value. That's a good value that I think Argentinians probably care about. And on the other hand, you have France, right? Argentina, the homogenous country, and France, the diverse country, right? And we know that diverse in this case actually means being not French. And if you're not French, you're diverse in the French national team. It's a very diverse country, right? There's none of the players really cares about the team. I mean, maybe some of them care in some regard, but it's not really their team in some form. And it is their team in some form, right? I mean, they were born there, some of them, I suppose. They lived there, they grew there, they have some kind of tie with that country. Okay, that's something that can be recognized. But you understand, you look at it and the way they play and the way they interact with each other, you start to notice that there isn't the teamwork that Argentina had. There isn't the dependence on each other that Argentina had. There was a lot of player quality, right? I mean, the French national team, pretty much nearly every single player in their team were elite level. Koundé wasn't. Julius Koundé, he's top level, right? He's not elite, but he's certainly top. Hugo Lloris, I will say he's an elite level goalkeeper in a top level team. Um, Mbappe obviously, Griezmann, right? Elite level player in a top level team. Ousmane Dembele, I don't think he's that good, but he's an elite team, right? Tchouaméni, all of these players, different players in France, they're all like really good players, some of the best in their positions, right? Particularly Mbappe. And then you look at Argentina. Okay, they got Messi, the goat of football, right? The greatest of all time in football. And they have a finished Di Maria. And the rest of the team you look at, okay, right, you have Romero, who's a top level player, but the rest of their team is not elite. Arguably, some of them aren't even top level. Okay, Alexis McAllister plays in Brighton. Brighton is like at best a mid-level team in the Premier League. You might not care about these things, but what I'm trying to say is there's a big difference. Not a big difference, but there's a important difference between the individual player qualities of two teams, right? And Argentina has a superstar, Messi, but France has multiple superstars. So that's the supposed advantage of diversity, is that you have the superstars, right? You're supposed to get the superstar engineers. You're supposed to get the superstar businessmen, the superstar bankers, the superstar politicians, right? That's the idea. That's what's supposed to be in the utopia of diversity. But what in reality happened? Anyone that knows a little something about football, especially the first 70 minutes of the game, really until minute 80, until Otamendi made a stupid blunder and gave the penalty away, Argentina was completely dominating the whole game. They had lower level of individual quality, but as a team, as a cohesive, high trust unit, they could communicate well with each other. They trusted each other. They had high teamwork, and their system throughout most of the game utterly worked. There was a severe difference in team quality, right? Individual quality, okay, France had the advantage, but team quality, Argentina was very far ahead. I mean, Argentina's play was some of the best I've seen in football. I'll be completely honest, and I watch football, occasionally, right? I support a team. I watch it occasionally, but outside of that, I don't spend every single day watching football stuff or football highlights or anything like that. It's something I enjoy. Something I enjoy talking with my friends. We don't have liberal propaganda much in our country, so it makes it more enjoyable. I won't watch Premier League even if I was English, because I will get sick of seeing some of the stuff that's being, that's going on. I mean, it's just it's not even football anymore. But to get back to the point, you see a very big difference between the two teams, and it really showcases the difference between the two societal models. On the one hand, you have the diversity that, in football terms, had an expected goal of 0.0, absolute zero shots overall, 0 shots on target until the 70th minute. I mean, that's insane. That is utterly insane in football terms. And in societal terms, if we translate that would be the difference between a first world country and a third world country. Right? It's not even a joke. That is really the difference between a first world and a third world country. And the only reason France even had a chance is because they had to bank on one of their superstars, Mbappe, to carry them. And by the way, I will also point out, check out Mbappe's model girlfriend. Quite interesting. But Mbappe carried the French team all alone, but a civilization doesn't run on a single group or a single person running the entire show. A civilization is supposed to be where the organization runs efficiently, and it's based on, again, high trust societies, people trusting in each other, people knowing each other, people having a very strong form of tangible bond with each other. None of that was existent in the French team, and their team play was very lacking. Many of their players, both individually and in terms of teamwork, couldn't really work together. They couldn't do anything together quite well. They had moments of brilliance where things randomly lined up, and then Argentina got the control back again, right? And I think it really showcases the two very different approaches and the fates of these two approaches, right? Okay, France won the 2018 World Cup with the same style of thinking. Okay. But when the World Cup catches up, or in civilizational terms, when nations start catching up, like, for example, Russia is catching up, is this going to work? Is this going to keep working? Or maybe perhaps the reason why it has been working in the first place because there's been a foundation set in stone that is slowly eroding and going away. And then once this foundation goes away, will we see the same kind of success? Perhaps not. And it's the same thing with football. It's the same thing with nations. Many European nations have a crumbling foundation. You look at in Turkey, for example, for my country, it's very normal for us to point out the idea of being Turkish, the idea of being Greek, the idea of being Russian, German, French, English, right? It's very simple to point that out as something special in and of itself, as distinct from, for example, being Moroccan, being Egyptian, being Syrian, right? All of these, they mean genuine things. They don't just mean a collection of languages and a collection of, cultural stuff that some people made up 2,000 years ago, and religion and stuff like that, but something even deeper than that. And I think there will be a danger to go extreme on that regard because, in many countries, it's natural to have people of different, stock playing for your country. Again, this is going to be a silly example, but in the Turkish national team, there was a time where you had like 3-4 Brazilian players that became Turkish citizens. And I think, if in France you had like 3-4 Mbappes, I don't think it will be a big deal if you had 7, I don't know, baguette eaters, right? But when the entire team is a Mbappe, then there's something going on, because what is it representing? The question is, what is that nation representing? What is that team representing? What is being represented and what is not being represented? And the gaslighting to some of the things that I'm saying, the gaslighting you see from this kind of stuff, when you point this out, is absolutely and utterly insane. And I think it's just it's not. I'm not trying to say anything negative about the players of the French national team. I don't think they are. I don't think they are the aggressors or anything like that. They're just people that the French national team picked them up and that they're playing for. I think the problem is really how did the things get to this level, right? I think that needs to be asked. I think that question needs to be asked, and that I think it's ultimately a tragedy for for people of countries like that. And I don't think it's a very comfortable situation. In the Ottoman civilization, you had the idea of the Janissaries, right? The Janissaries from their childhood were taken from different Balkanists, right? Greeks, Bulgarians, Serbians, right? Serbian children, Greek children. They were taken, from their families, and they were brought onto the Ottoman fold, and they were trained to be soldiers, or they were trained to be, working in the government, right? They were basically high-level capital to be used by the Ottoman government. And it was systematic, right? This was something that was used, and I'm not saying I'm not making a moral judgment about it, because I think these things are a lot more complex and nuanced than a lot of people think it is, right? If you just say, "Oh, this civilization bad because you had Janissaries," I think it's kind of childish, because I think every single civilization makes use of things that a lot of people think is very barbaric. I love the Christian Roman Empire. It's my favorite empire. It's really my favorite civilization. It is in many ways my ideal civilization. But the practice of blinding political opponents, that is quite barbaric, right? That's not something I really like. I don't really enjoy that. But I'm not going to make a moral pronouncement or judgment about it, because I do also understand that within the context of that civilization and within the context of the situations evolving in that civilization, that's the best thing that they could have gone with. There's a difference between that, right? There's a difference between that, where there's a purpose to it, between just cold-blooded barbarism, right? Like things like child sacrifice, right? That is just cold-blooded barbarism that should not be acceptable and allowed. Obviously, in philosophical debates, this needs to be hashed out a lot more clearer, right? I'm not making a liberal tier argument where I'm saying, "Oh, I don't like this shouldn't be allowed," kind of a thing, right? I understand that they internally had their own reasons too. I understand that. I'm just saying that those internal reasonings are clearly the work of a demonic spirit, right? Such practices are very contrary to the very nature of man and the very nature of the world itself. But I'm getting to a bit off topic. What I'm trying to pretty much say here is that this situation that I'm kind of pointing out in different European countries where there's a demographic renewal, I guess one can say, um, it's it's just generally speaking not a pleasant situation. I think it will be a very wrong move to um, use it against like people like Mbappe, right? Like players like him, or other players of the French national team, other players of the English national team. I mean, they're not the ones that wanted to do this. You know, these aren't they don't have this in mind. Really, the problem is at the people in charge, and those people in charge, they don't have your interests, and by the way, they don't even have the interests of the other players. They seem to have their interests, but their real intention isn't even for their own interest. It's really ultimately for their own personal interest. So in a way, you can say that the liberal elite, not even the liberal elite, just like the elites, right? Or what some people say, the matrix. I don't like the term too much, but that's a good way to look at it. Like whatever you want to call it, right? The Freemasons or like whatever. I guess you could say they're kind of like Instagram influencers. They only care about themselves, and they just want to have glory just by existing in a place. And they implement and enact certain policies, international policies and international decisions that ultimately screws over everyone at the end of the day. Because when you see, for example, after the France-Morocco game, a riot in France because of this game. I mean, in a sense, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of spirit, right? Like that's some soul, that's spirit. That's entertaining. But in a different sense, it's like it's a bad precedent. You don't want it. You don't enjoy it. You don't want to see that happen, right? If there's a big difference between your brothers in your house causing ruckus and a stranger coming into your house causing ruckus and saying my rules apply here now, right? And I think that's kind of what is going on over here. Of course, I don't think these people, many of them, I think some of them do think this way, but I don't think many of them think that way exactly. So that's kind of the general take that I have with the World Cup, how it kind of reflects and showcases the way of thinking, the method of thinking. And I think this can obviously get into the this showcases, I think, really the European thinking, the modern Western European or American thinking. And I am quite happy that Argentina won. Aside from the good football, I'm also quite happy for them winning because of what they represented, right? I don't like Argentina because I like Argentina. I like Argentina because I respect it as a nation, just like how I respect France as a nation. And I want to respect itself. That's pretty much what I want. But all of the things that I'm saying, the solutions are very difficult. They're never going to be as simple as just one size fits all solution, and we're just gonna fix everything. That's not how things go. So, I'm just gonna check the comments out. Oh yeah, and Krista Eleson pointed out, Argentina doesn't have so the Washington Post made an article asking, why is Argentina not diverse? Why is Argentina not diverse enough? Let me see. Argentina World Cup diversity. It's gonna come up. Oh, the title is incredibly strong for this. Yeah. Wait, why is it? All right. Let me just not just do the window capture thing. All right. This is literally the title for the article. Democracy dies in darkness, guys. Democracy dies in darkness. This is so dangerous for our democracy. Why don't they have more diverse people in the World Cup? That's that's so crazy. They're far more diverse than many people realize. I mean, why doesn't this person ask, why doesn't France have more French players in the World Cup? I mean, I think a better title will be, why doesn't France have French players in the World Cup? But of course, that will not be acceptable. But this question, no, that's completely acceptable, because what? Because we want every single, and here's the funny thing about the term diversity, is that they claim they like diversity, but they don't like diversity. They don't like Argentina being Argentinian. They don't like France being French. They don't like Turkey being Turkish. They don't like Norway being Norwegian. They don't like America being American. They don't like Canada being Canadian. They don't like Mexico being Mexican. Mexico. If we say Mexico in Turkish, so I kind of forget about it. They don't like Spain being Spanish. They don't like Morocco being Moroccan. They don't like Syria being Syrian. They don't like Egypt being Egyptian. You know, you can see the examples. They don't like Russia being Russian. They like Ukraine being Ukrainian so far, right? After the war, we're gonna see if they're gonna want that. Um, they don't want Poland being Polish, right? You get the point. That's not diversity, okay, in the truest sense. And I don't think diversity. Unity is not a good in and of itself. Diversity is not a good in and of itself. Okay, they have to be contextualized in their proper understanding to be good, right? For them to be good, right? Unity to build a Tower of Babel is an evil thing, right? Um, but diversity in a nation, diversity, right, which is just anything but actual diversity, is is the same pretty much. So it's just insane how people don't. It's crazy to me how people don't see this. This is use. I can't. I cannot stay normal when I see Washington Post, democracy dies in darkness. And nothing is more perfect than that, like, underline, that subtitle. Democracy dies in darkness. And you see the democracy that they're preaching. This is your democracy that you're preaching? I don't want democracy. Goodbye. Goodbye to democracy. I don't like that. I want something else. Right? Give me something else. Not this. Anyways. They don't mind Moroccans being Moroccans. I mean, so far, right? But eventually in the future, that's going to change. Um, the problem with the French team is that they basically take talents from other countries at a cheap price, depriving those countries from their young people while not training their own. Exactly, exactly. And that is the actual colonizing attitude that the very people who are promoting diversity are actually supporting, right? So people need to understand this as well, is that this is this is I mean, this is the perpetuation of colonization that you see. Um, Whereas we're kind of saying, no, let's reverse it. Let's try to reverse it. Let's try to set things back to normal. Um, so I don't know. It's just contradictions abound. But I think one of the things that you see is that people don't care about contradictions anymore. People don't see the blatant contradictions, the blatant disconnect that they see in society. Um, yes, I think there can be more said about this in a different stream. That's not really the purpose of this stream. I just kind of want to talk about the World Cup, anything except for the sports itself, because again, most of you guys are not really that interested in sports ball. You're not really interested in football. You're not interested in World Cup, and I'd like to talk about it, like some stuff about it, but not on my channel, because I don't think it's the place for it. But if you I don't see. It seems like the chat has another discussion, so I'm just going to end it here. I appreciate all of you listening to this, and I also want to thank my Patreon financiers as well for supporting this channel. Thank you all for watching this as well. Make sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already, and hope to see you in other videos. And thank you to Vander, Robert, Sean, Larry, Andy, Peyton, GigaChat, Quinn, Michael, Sean, Brian, Marco, Diet, Sodalite, Allison, Eddie, Node, Maximus, Vlad, Kerry, Mike, Nectarius, Flood Basement, Dave, Seraphim, and Norbert. Thank you for supporting me. Thank you all for watching the stream. And I will see you all in the next stream, most likely in the next video, probably, that is going to be uploaded tomorrow. So keep your eyes open, and